Please let me start over. Good afternoon, members of the media. Good afternoon, visitors from the cabinet. Thank you very much for accompanying me this afternoon. I really should have been in Tobago now. It was my plan to travel to Tobago this morning for the weekend. But when I got up this morning, I saw the headline in the newspaper, and I realized that my weekend could not start without me talking to the people of Trinidad and Tobago through you, the media, on what I consider to be very serious matters. I'm here talking about the headline in the Express, which covers a series of ongoing issues all in one. I wasn't aware that there was a court matter which actually took place on Tuesday, but I'm aware of the history of the issue, but I wasn't aware of the actual Tuesday's proceedings. But on Tuesday, an ongoing matter of state came up before Justice C. Prasad as part of the normal court proceedings. And it appears as though arising out of that, you, the media, in doing your work, had a reason to contact the head of the last government, the leader of the opposition, and the leader of the party that formed the last government, with respect to what transpired in the court. I want to make it very clear here now that I am cognizant that there are matters in the court which are subject to the observation of the sub judice behavior, and I have no intention of attempting to try any of the matters in the court or to take issue with any of the evidence that is being adduced in the court. But there are certain facts that I want to talk to you about in the context of the headline in the Express, where a former prime minister, the current leader of the opposition, a person of wide experience, could respond to court proceedings in Trinidad and Tobago in the phrase that, well, let me just quote what the Express put it. I think the editors captured it well. Kamala dismisses corruption claims against Munilal as, quote, all them Indians is thief, unquote, smear campaign. And the headline says, racist election plot. Rudal slams government's cock and bull story. In short, I am going to explain to the children the opposition's explanation of facts or allegations in the court, but certainly processes and procedures in the court, is dismiss it. It's all a racist election plot by the PNM against Munilal. And Munilal jumps in and says, what you would have heard in the court, or what you're asking about, is government's cock and bull story. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a very serious matter. Because who are these two people who can so flippantly and hopefully dismiss court proceedings in this country in the following way? Munilal describes it as scandalous and obscene cock and bull story. Mrs. Kamala Prasad Bissessa describes it as election smear, fabricated, but PNM pathetically peddling the same tired allegations without getting anywhere. She continues to describe it, PNM propaganda in an election year, PNM lame and lazy electioneering, And then if that did not sufficiently put the public on the wrong track, she goes on to gild the lily by saying it's all part of the Nelson fake scandal. Nelson meaning the senior counsel who was in our court sometime before. It's a witch hunt. And of course, don't forget the $3 billion missing that the government can't explain. That is how a former prime minister responds to a requirement to connect to a court proceeding in this country. What are the facts? I want you all to pay careful attention to a particular date, because I want to go to where this whole thing started. It started around the time of a proclamation in 2015. The proclamation that dissolved the parliament came into effect on the 17th of June. That's when the parliament that Mrs. Prasad Bisesa led as prime minister, the government then, the parliament dissolved 17th of June. The election was the 7th of September. So keep that period in your mind. I want to draw your attention to one or two cabinet decisions which a government is entitled to make throughout its term until it's out of office. This is cabinet minute, where a cabinet minute is the decision that a cabinet would have taken when somebody comes to the cabinet with what is called a cabinet note, asking the cabinet to consider certain things and to take a decision on it. The cabinet is free to agree to take that decision or a modified division or no decision at all. But when the cabinet takes a decision on the presentation, the request, it goes as a cabinet minute, as an instruction, and then that goes out to be acted upon. So this cabinet minute, number 1656 of 2015, talks about a matter that was considered on the 2nd of July. Remember, the parliament dissolved June 30th, right? 2nd of July. There's no parliament, but the government is still in office until election day. And the decision that was taken on the 2nd of July was confirmed the same day, 2nd of July. Again, that is quite normal, but sometimes you may confirm it the following week. But in this case, it was brought forward, confirmed on the same day. And the issue was approval of funding for the payment of contractors engaged with EMBD. That is where this whole thing has its origin. There's another cabinet note. This one is note 1656. But this is the note on which this decision was taken. Because this is July 1st, the note is July 1st, the cabinet decision is July 2nd, the day after. So somebody came to the cabinet on July 1st and asked for, and let me just read a few lines or phrases in the field. Cabinet is advised that by minute number 2487, dated the 4th of September 2014, which is the prior year, and the heading, the subject was approval of funding in the amount of 400 million for payment of contractors engaged with estate management and business EMBD. So the EMBD issue was there as a cabinet decision-making process. And in this case, it makes reference to something in 2014. What was it in 2014 that the note is making reference to? Because cabinet notes are required to inform the full cabinet as to what the story is. Where is this coming from? What is it connected to? Why are we dealing with this? It says, A, cabinet agreed A in 2014, subject to availability of funds, to approve funding in the total of a sum of $2.58 billion for the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development. So this is an issue involving the Ministry and the Minister of Housing and Urban Development. And this sum has to do with expenditure by EMBD, a state enterprise, which is funded by the Treasury, to develop 14 sites in an appendix there. And B, to approve funding in the total of $781,600,000, made up of, in an appendix, for certified works on the 14 sites being developed by EMBD. So EMBD was on 14 pieces of land, putting in infrastructure, and we happen to know it was for Caroni workers to get plots. And it goes on again in D to say, subject to the availability of funds to the provision of the sum of $1.65 billion in fiscal 2014, coming from the IDF, which is the Infrastructure Development Fund, for allocation to the said ministry for the above-mentioned sites. Subsequently, Cabinet in minute number 971, dated April 30th, 2015, so come forward from 2014 to 2015. Remember the date here is July 1st, 2015, inter alia. Cabinet agreeing now in 2015. The upgrade and development of 10 existing former Caronies ancillary bypass roads, 37 kilometers worth, at an estimated cost of $330 million. And this is July 1st. Parliament is due to dissolve July 30th. Election is September 7th. I think we've been called by then, if I'm not mistaken. The election would have been called by then, because with the dissolution, you only have 90 days. This cabinet note, dated July 23rd, says, matter considered by Cabinet July 23rd, confirmed July 30th, 1 week later. So action cannot begin on it until July 30th. Goes on to say, Cabinet minute, EMBD borrowing from FCB $400 million. Cabinet is approving that you borrow this $400 million. Just as the Parliament had been dissolved, election call, so this minister and whoever else has $400 million to deal with these 10 sites in Caroni, in Caneland, on which contract is on. July 22nd, the details, the approval is there for this approval for $400 million. This is the origin of this matter in front of the judge, which came up on Tuesday, because the election was called on September 7th against this arrangement taking place in the outgoing government. They lost the election. When the new government came in, EMBD, under a new board, is now faced with claims for huge sums of monies for work done in the context of those 10 cane roads in Caroni, which had the attention of the last government in the way I just described in the month of July. And this $400 million was dispensed and paid out in a matter in August, following certification having taken place before. So EMBD, the state company, is asking, what are we being asked to pay for? Turned out that the board of the EMBD, acting for the taxpayer, had reason to be concerned about payments made, payments being requested, certificates of confirmation, and so on. So Here's a state company doing state company work. And had reason now to say, this is a matter that should be addressed by the court. So by 24th of April 2017, let me just quickly mention a number of court visits by this matter, EMBD and the interested parties. 24th of April, a contractor filed an action against EMBD because EMBD was, in a way, resisting or asking for information or checking and double-checking what they were being asked to pay. So one contractor filed a matter on the April 2017. May 1st, same 2017, another contractor filed for 60 million. The first one was for 22 million, this one was 60 million. On the 11th of May, another contractor filed for 40 million. And these are claims being made against the EMBD. 12th of October 2017, EMBD, acting for the state, taxpayer interest, public interest, filed a defense and counterclaim to each of the three matters I just mentioned. So three contractors filed suit against EMBD for substantial millions. EMBD looked at the situation, rather than pay, decided to contest in the public interest in the court. So that's October 2017. And in doing so, EMBD made a complaint to the court that these people colluded among themselves and with other persons named in the EMBD defense and counterclaim. One of them was a former government minister. One was the CEO of EMBD. Another was the divisional manager. Another one was the project manager in an unlawful means conspiracy that led to the award of 12 contracts and the payment of $300 million for defective and overpriced work. That is the taxpayer's case before the court, put there by a state enterprise board acting on behalf of the taxpayer. So anybody who you hear calling that a hoax or a cock and bull story or whatever else, that is the fact, that is the subject that has gone before our court. On the 20th of November 2017, EMBD filed a claim form and a statement of case against the former minister and the people I just mentioned, CEO, divisional managers, persons who the board was of the view had something to do with the matter in front of the board. March and April 2018, the contractors file applications. Now, this is in our court, ladies and gentlemen. The contractors file applications to strike out EMBD's counterclaim and ask the court to order EMBD to provide further and better particulars of the claim. I want to repeat that. The contractors, interested parties, against whom allegations were made, who are before the court, asked the court to strike out EMBD's counterclaim and to ask EMBD to provide further and better particulars. One of those interested parties is a former minister named in this matter. And of course, no defenses were filed by the contractors or the minister or the employees. But that's a matter for the court. That's going on in the court. And take note of this date, because you're hearing about election, as I mentioned earlier on, and the statements from the current opposition leader about election propaganda and whatever. This is now 6th of August 2020. Now, we had a general election in 2020. What date was that? On the 10th of August, there was a general election in this country, which had nothing to do in coming into being in the context of those court dates I just mentioned. And the judge gave his judgment on this matter on the 6th of August 2020. Honorable Justice Aboud dismissed the applications to strike out EMBD's counterclaims and claimed filed by the contractors and the interested parties. So this matter is a matter that had some consideration by the court, and the court found it necessary to dismiss the application to strike out EMBD's pleadings to the court. And it had nothing to do with the PNM or with any election timetable or with any election. It was the taxpayer state enterprise interests acting on behalf of the taxpayer who since April 2017 was going through the court process and proceedings. And here was the judgment by Justice Aboud saying to the contractors who wanted the matter thrown out of court, no, the matter has merit and it will continue. And part of that judgment was to request of them, put in your defense. Understand? The judgment said, they were saying that it's a fishing expedition. The court didn't agree. The court, on the contrary, is saying, I have seen no fishing expedition. What I've seen is enough to say that you have a case to answer and you're required to put in a defense. That is since August 2020. They appealed that matter on 14th of August 2020. The contractors filed a procedural appeal against the order of the judge. And the minister went behind that and said, well, the contractors appealing, so I am not going to put it on my defense. My defense will have to depend on how the contractors proceed. That's the minister. 2021, appellate judges Miradine Amora, Rani Budu Singh failed to arrive at an agreed decision after considering the evidence and submissions in an appeal. And you in the media would have carried a situation where one of the judges, Justice Wilson, this is in June 2023, when the panel came back in 2023, June, Court of Appeal panel was dissolved. So the matter was before the court, an appeal panel is in place, I think 3 judges. One of them had to withdraw because there was a judge who had a relative who was connected by the board of the EMBD, and in order to make sure that fairness prevailed, that judge withdrew, and that disrupted the proceedings. That was June 2023, but the matter is in the court. 12th December, the third hearing, that is 12th December 2023. The third hearing of the contractor's procedural appeal in Court of Appeal. 30th of January 2024, Court of Appeal, comprising the Honorable Justice Peter Rajkumar, Vashis Kokram, and Shamin Pemberton, dismissed the contractor's procedural appeal. So for the second time, the court, this time the Court of Appeal, dismissed the request made by those against whom allegations were being made, confirming that there was a case for the court. Justice Rajkumar, who delivered the panel's decision, ruled that EMBD had properly pleaded that it suffered actual pecuniary loss as a result of the alleged unlawful means conspiracy between the contractors and the state official. That was the finding of our appeal court. The case wasn't tried, but what was tried is whether there was a case to be tried. Justice Rajkumar also rejected claims that EMBD's pleading did not properly give particulars linking the contractors and so on. I don't want to go too much into that. But 19th of March 2024, contractors' motion for conditional leave of appeal to the Privy Council. So they failed to knock it out in the High Court, failed to knock it out in the Appeal Court. So now they go to the Privy Council. The decision of the Court of Appeal was dismissed by the Honorable Court of Appeal. 30th of April, the contractors filed an application directly. So they asked for permission to go to the Privy Council. The court of, it was not given because it was dealt to be not necessary. Having not been given permission through the normal court process, they used the next available avenue, which is to go directly to the Privy Council. So here is a citizen or an agency taking advantage of everything available in the court after an appeal, Privy Council. On the 8th of October, the Privy Council dismissed the contractor's appeal for special leave by ordering permission to appeal to be refused because the application does not raise an arguable point of law or a point of law of general public purpose. In other words, they didn't see any case. Privy Council dismissed. So the attempt to prevent EMBD from seeking to protect the public interest by using the court failed 3 times. And at the end, the state's company position prevails. And they are now required, having exhausted those steps, they are now required to put in their defense so that the matter can be heard, the substance of the matter can be heard in the court, and the evidence can be adjudicated upon by the court, because it has always been a court matter. Right? Court matter. So, why is it that a former prime minister, a hopeful prime minister, the current opposition leader, a senior counsel and officer of the court, with another one in tow, attempting to tell the population of Trinidad and Tobago, the children, the university students, the high school students, the pensioners, to tell them that these hundreds of millions issue that your state company is pursuing in the court, which has survived many blows in the court and prevailed, with the Privy Council throwing it out of there, that is a P&M matter as an election propaganda, or that it is obscene, and that it is. And I tell you all this so you could understand the extent of the misconduct of those 2 officers, so that you could understand the deception that is attempted against the people of Trinidad and Tobago by 2 officers of state who are, in fact, working hard to get their way back into the parliament, to get back into government, because interestingly enough, Dr. Mulnal made a comment in talking to you in the media, comparing this situation with Donald Trump in America, where Mr. Trump, through the court system in New York and elsewhere, was charged, he went to court in a trial, was convicted, but as far as Dr. Mulnal is concerned, he is a victim of the Department of Justice weaponized against Mr. Trump, and he too suffered the same thing here in Trinidad and Tobago. And of course, you know what happened? Well, Mr. Trump came into office. That is no longer a fantasy. It is now a fairy tale. Because only yesterday, right? Let me not go into the details up there, but you know what's happening there. And one of our ministers, who is in the court, in matters as described by you here, a live matter in the court, which I am being very careful not to go into the evidence, right? Over taxpayers attempting to escape paying to people $300 million, which persons facilitated. And the very people who are before the court are telling you that nonsense about P&M and election propaganda, and is an election smear on the UNC. And of course, we in the P&M, or in the government, we are accused of being lazy, that we don't want to do political work, but we just want to smear the UNC. And this is the rubber doll. Going out a dog whistle. Only 2 weeks ago, I was speaking to a P&M gathering at Napa, and I said to them and to the country that the P&M's greatest legacy in Trinidad and Tobago is the interracial solidarity that we have managed through Dr. Williams' guidance to preserve in this country, which holds us up as a model nation. You have 2 people or more here in trouble with the law over money, with a court matter involving judges and the Privy Council, saying to you that this is about the PNM trying to smear, how it's put? Indians as thieves. What? The campaign that the PNM is a PNM campaign for this election 2025, and the campaign is all them Indians is thief. So because Mrs. Prasad Bissessa has attracted that epithet onto herself, she now is prepared to defend Dr. Munilal by implicating every Indian in Trinidad and Tobago and saying that is the PNM who's saying so. I want to say something here to the people of Trinidad and Tobago, especially the East Indian population. You have nothing to fear from the rest of the population. The law will determine who is police and who is thief. This is a particularly offensive comment by Mrs. Kamala Prasad Bissessa. We have Indian children here in primary school, in kindergarten, in university. We have people of the Indian population in the public service at every level. And this lady and her friends, right, getting in trouble in the court, rather than putting your defense as the court requires them to do, is seeking now to hide under the wings of the East Indian population. And the population and the PNM and the government will have none of it. This has nothing to do with your race. It has to do with your personal character, because character matters. And nobody who is not listed in this matter should take any offense at the proceedings in the court or to carry any burden, because the court will determine who is innocent or who is guilty. And, you know, if this was a one-off situation, one would have said that, well, you know, this is not what they're accustomed to doing, and therefore you can give them a bly. Trouble is, it is not. This is the normal behavior of Mrs. Prasad Bissessa and the cabal that she led when she was in government, that she is trying to put together now. And as fate would have it, the court proceedings have come in just like it did in 2020. Justice Aboud's judgment came, I think, a few days before the election. Now, I probably didn't hear her say that the PNM has something to do with that. Maybe we call the judge out from sleep to come out election week to give his judgment. Have nothing to do with those of us in government or the party opposed to the UNC. Nothing whatsoever. All of us here know how the courts function, step by step. After years of twin and froing, the Privy Council ruled. And now Justice C. Prasad has his job to do, to listen and adjudicate upon evidence presented to him. EMBD made allegations, they have to go to court with evidence. But one point is, in the early part of the attempt to knock out the proceedings of the EMBD pleadings, those who had allegations made against him said to the court, we don't know what to answer because it is not sufficiently clear. We want to know more. We want further particulars. That's how it's called in the court. Further particulars. So now the court allowed EMBD to amend its original pleadings to put in the further particulars which the EMBD has. You know how these two officers of the court describe that? That is a new matter that the PNM raised for this election. You ever heard any more ridiculous state of affairs? The court allowed EMBD in response to the request for further particulars to put in more information. And you know what the more information is? Even more damning evidence. Understand? But they believe that you're stupid or that nobody will assist you in understanding it. So these two people, one a former prime minister, lawyer, senior counsel that she is, the other leader of government business, senior counsel, one of whom took the note to cabinet to get the money. The money, like a flash in the pan, disappeared. Other people came into office, followed the money, and it ended up in front of all these judges. And this headline today is the response of people who are aspirants to high office in this country, who have held high office in this country, and for whom our normal legal proceedings, safeguarded at every step, where your rights are there. As you would have seen, the contractors went directly to the Privy Council when the appeal court told them you had no case. And at the end of it, our judicial process said, you have a case to answer. But Mrs. Prasad Bissessa seems to have an attraction for people with cases to answer. Because you may recall, as I speak to you now, we had problems like this before. We had the airport matter, Piarco Airport. You of the media will know, you carried in your columns, that same Mrs. Prasad Bissessa saying that all this talk about Piarco Airport corruption is a hoax. I read that in your pages. A hoax where Americans had already gone to jail over Piarco Airport. The company Calma Quip, people there went to jail, standing by in Miami to be cooperating witnesses with the state of the United States. Trinidad and Tobago pursuing criminal conduct at Piarco Airport, yet the leader of the opposition, former prime minister, could stand up on a political platform and say that that whole Piarco story is PNM propaganda and a hoax driven by the PNM of number 1 Tranquility Street, when in fact what it is criminal conduct, evidence adduced in court, and people either innocent or guilty. Monies have been repaid, and when she said that it was a hoax, what she didn't tell you was that while she was in government, cash restitution was paid to this country. Millions of dollars came back to this country quietly and secretly. They never said a word. We only found out about that after, when we were pursuing the matter later on, after 5 years of being dormant and ignored. Because while she was leading the government, one, you had an attorney general taking a stand to not extradite anybody, right? Yeah, he's writing, give an instruction about no extradition, right? And of course, not pursuing the matter in Florida. We, as a government, I will tell you, when I became Prime Minister, it was September 7th, 2015. I went to the first heads of government meeting in Malta. At that meeting, I was one of there were 2 new prime ministers who came in the Commonwealth, then I was one, and Justin Trudeau was the other one. And as a result of being new, we were given a lot more attention than we normally would have had. The issue then, driven by Prime Minister Cameron of the United Kingdom, was the whole question of corruption worldwide. And Britain was taking the lead in encouraging countries to fight white-collar corruption, with an intention to take that issue to the United Nations in September of the following year. A conference took place in London, and Prime Minister Cameron invited me to participate in that conference. That conference had 8 presidents, 9 prime ministers, a number of ministers of justice, a number of special ministers sent by the government for the particular reason, attorney generals and foreign ministers. I think I was the only prime minister from the Caribbean who was invited to that meeting. It had President Buhari from Nigeria, Prime Minister of Singapore, John Kerry of the United States. We had India. There are a number of countries represented in that meeting. Unfortunately, between then, May of 2016, and the UN in September, Prime Minister Cameron went and gambled on a referendum, lost it, lost his government, lost his position, and the issue remained dormant, but that's where it was heading. But Prime Minister Cameron, those of you who are in the media and you are interested, you might be able to find a communique from that meeting. There it is. Anti-Corruption Summit 2016, PM's closing remarks. You may want to find that and read it. This was the United Kingdom led by Prime Minister Cameron following the Malta conference. And this meeting, I was present and participated here. And alongside there were all the leaders, the IMF, the World Bank, Interpol, all these people were there in that particular meeting. And Trinidad and Tobago, as we have done before by Prime Minister Patrick Manning, committed to resolutely root out white-collar crime as it occurs in our country. White-collar crime meaning crime committed by people in office, officers of state, and persons who use state machinery to enrich themselves. White-collar crime. So EMBD going to court to pursue $300 million claim against persons who had in fact done business with the state was doing nothing out of the ordinary. It was simply following the country's commitment to treating with white-collar crime. And the same thing applies to a PNM government in 2016, going to Miami and picking up where it was left off, where for 5 years there was a government pretending that we didn't have a case in Miami, hoping that it would disappear. And when the Attorney General goes to Miami or picked up the matter, he came under relentless attack. When it's not him, it's his children. When not his children, it's his family. Relentless attack, hoping that you will drop the fight against white-collar crime. And all this attack now and all this nonsense about PNM and propaganda and obscene and a cock and bull story, that is how some people in our country respond to the government or the state or persons who in fact commit to dealing with white-collar criminal conduct in our country. It's right there in front of you to see. We have a parliamentarian on $1 million bill. We expect to see him in the cabinet soon, if you go to mine. But then we have a number of parliamentarians in one particular party who have issues with the court. Right? I need not go into the details of live sport. You may not know. On many occasions, the state has to have cabinet approval to pay the cost, to send policemen abroad, to meet people in witness protection, to take testimony, to come back to Trinidad and Tobago in pursuit of criminal conduct. Understand? But that is only one side. The very said opposition leader who is today making those statements and trying to incite racial responses to her problems of her party and her subordinates having court issues, had the opportunity to easily allow a report to hold accountable people who were involved in live sport. And what did she do? She, as senior counsel, we expect she would know that if you don't let people know what you're saying about them in any report, those persons can in fact have the report quashed. And of course, that's exactly what she did. And when the court ruled in her friend's favor, the very night, the very day the court ruled, he was there on a platform, promised a senatorship, and he has been on the Senate ever since, embarrassing the country and whoever else pay attention to him. So we have a difference. You would have heard me on many occasions between 2014 and 2023 talking about the OS situation. That was a situation where the state stood to lose and had in fact lost $971 million, largely and simply because somebody in the UNC government's administration, on the last working day that government was in office, election was the Monday, right, the 7th of September, on the Friday, somebody removed a clause from the contract that said if the contractor is bankrupt, then the bonds that secure the government's money in the contract belong to the government. through its agents NIDCO. Up to this day, you could not get a whisper, a syllable from the government who led that administration that did that. It was this government that had to go and fight in the court abroad to get the support of the court to get back those bonds. And we used that money to finish the Point 14 highway. At the opening of the highway, I, as Prime Minister, presented all the information available to the country at that time, and it was put in the Parliament. And there has been a joint select committee of the Parliament to look into this matter. And you know who's not cooperating with it? The opposition has no interest in it, and they do whatever they have to do to try to ensure that the committee does not function. Because as far as they're concerned, who cares? Because today, when a member of her team in the Parliament presented a comment to the country explaining why he will not be screened under her and her friends. Because he said, and let me quote him, this is a parliamentarian talking about a party in the Parliament, that it's a party that has abandoned its principles, rewards mediocrity, shields those accused of wrongdoing, and punishes integrity. Those are the words of the Member of Parliament of Kumuto Manzanilla describing the organization led and defended by Mrs. Kamla Prasad Bisesa. His words, not mine. And of course, the words of a former commissioner of police, who was a member of the cabinet that she led. And he said, you know what? Put it in writing. They are a criminal unit fronting as a political party. Their words, not mine. You see, none of this should surprise us. Because when Mrs. Prasad Bisesa was in government, that same airport matter that she called a hoax, she labeled herself indelibly with Section 34, where in order to create a loophole for people who had issues in the court and were attempting to avoid their day in court, duped the Parliament, misled the Parliament into passing laws to create Section 34. And that wasn't enough. Proclaim it in the dead of night when the rest of the country was watching fireworks. And it was so horrible to the population that when I, as an opposition leader, called the population to march to the President's house to complain about what the government had done, thousands of persons marched from Port of Spain to St. Anne's on this matter. And the government was so upset about it and frightened by it, came back to Parliament the next day and amended the law and removed Section 34. That is the record of Mrs. Prasad Bisesa, who today is casting that kind of aspersion on court proceedings here, trying to give favor to Dr. Munilal, who is the subject of a very serious court matter, where millions of dollars have to be accounted for in the court, and calling the PNM name. Don't mention the PNM in this. This has nothing to do with the PNM. It is not a government matter only insofar as a state enterprise is doing its duty and the government provides the resources. And one of the problems they have is how much money you pay the lawyer. You know what they're saying to us? Let them thief at will. Do what they want at will. Don't spend any money because lawyers are expensive. That's what they're telling us. We can say the same thing about murders. Cost too much money to pursue a murderer. Murders in this country could cost as much as $10 million. But we pursue every single one of them. Because we have to. We can't say, because it's expensive, we can't go after people who break the law. That's what they're asking us to do. And every day they want to know how much it costs, how much it costs. And of course, seeking to do what Dr. Munlal said there, in the style of go after those who had the temerity to look into the matter. Make them the subject. Make them the victim. Ladies and gentlemen, this kind of normalization of criminal conduct in our society has to stop. And that is why today I am taking issue with a former Prime Minister carrying the title of senior counsel could be in this position, providing cover for people who have questions to answer about criminal conduct, about public money, and try to give you the impression that nobody cares. Nobody cares? Well, I think we all should care. That people like that could see an election and believe that they could take that position and benefit in an election. We in the PNM, we are ready for election anytime because they come and go, night or day, Tobago, local government general, we are there. I, as Prime Minister, and my team, we took an oath of office to act without fear or favor, without malice or ill will, and it's government policy. As I said in Malta, as I said in London in 2016, the government of Trinidad and Tobago will do whatever it's able to do to ensure that white-collar crime does not prevail unimpeded in Trinidad and Tobago. And if you find yourself before the court, let the law take its course. It has to be that out of ignorance, they will tell you those things, hoping that you don't know what I just told you here today, or that you don't care, that those things don't matter. Other things matter. This is what matters. This is what matters. Whether we are prepared to stand for right, to stand for law, and to ask people who want public office, what is your character like? And that is a matter for the court. We in the PNM, we in this government, we are not trying anybody's case. You know, in our country, once the police gets involved and people are interdicted, people are charged, you go before the court, the government has no say or no role. So it is really, what is really obscene is for the leader of the opposition, a senior counsel, an officer of the court, could see a British senior counsel come to Trinidad and Tobago in our court, stand up in front of Justice Holdip, and admit criminal conduct, got convicted, got sentenced. That situation stands unresolved. I know of no situation so far where Mr. Nelson has removed his testimony from the record of our courts. I don't know that. But the leader of the opposition is today talking about the Nelson hoax, giving the impression that what senior counsel Nelson stood in the dock and was sentenced for and convicted for is a hoax. Could you imagine that? Senior counsel, stand up in front of the judge. The judge asked him, are you aware of what you are agreeing to? Tell the judge, yes. Right? Confirming his testimony, confirming his actions. And of course, having told us that on our court record, the Attorney General's office said, well, we are going to pursue the money that some people stole. That has to be done civilly. You have these people, senior counsel and friends telling you, because it's a civil matter, it doesn't matter. Have you ever heard more nonsense? Because the matter has to be pursued in the civil court, it doesn't matter. We, in this government, are refusing to accept that we can disregard court proceedings in such a flippant way, or that we can encourage colleagues who are making a career of disregarding their oath of office, hoping that the public doesn't find out or that the public doesn't care. If you have any questions, I take it. I have a plane to catch, but I can take a couple of questions.
Good afternoon, Privy REAP. You did a presentation by saying you want to use but yet you presented some cabinet notes. You know, are you not prejudiced in the case by doing that?
No, Prior. I was very careful with what I've done. Very careful. I have not done anything outside of the requirements. Sub judice don't mean I can't talk about something. It means that you cannot go and seek to influence the judge. I have not done that. what I've done here is historical. Right? I mean, I spoke about things that are not evidence being tried in front of me or the court. The court matter is still intact. And I was very careful to tell you, we subscribe to respect for the court's adjudication on this and other matters. We are not the ones who saying that it is, what do you call it? Cock and bull story and all the people who took part in the various decisions, all the way to the Privy Council. They don't matter. We're not the ones doing that. Right?
Leader of Munilal is screening for his seat of work, which is today. And we asked the opposition leader yesterday if these allegations would affect his chances, and she said absolutely not. I'm just curious, right, that had you had to handle that situation as a political leader, if that was happening within the PNM, would you have had the same approach? Or?
I don't have that, and I'm glad I don't have that. I will tell you, because I'm in the PNM, I will never have that to deal with. Any other question? Yes.
Good day. It doesn't always happen often, but it seems that there are members of UNC that have been in agreement with what you were mentioning just now. The case, you mentioned Dr. Rai Ragbir. When he sent out his release yesterday in his explanation, he cited the fact that he refused to be screened because members of the committee are involved in the mismanagement of funds. So he's saying that's one of the many reasons that he refused to be screened by the party. However, he reiterated that he's committed to the people of Kumuto, Manzanilla. I know the PNM is screening for that seat on Monday. Seeing that you all are right now on the same page, are you open to Dr. Rai Ragbir being screened for that seat?
Let me just tell you why that is not a possibility. PNM has deadline dates. You have opening and closing. So I think Kumuto, Manzanilla, we have screening. The reason why we're screening on Monday is that the nomination is closed. And I'll tell you something else too about the PNM, is that we don't have ad hoc screening committees. The screening committee in the PNM is a constitutional gathering of people who get on that committee only by virtue of the executive office that they hold in the party. Right? So we're not open to those kinds of arrangements.
We are ready for election anytime. I won't lie to you, when we saw the turnout today, we thought that today would have been the day that we went to have an election, because everyone is in a good mood and very friendly and sitting amongst us. No. Can you give us any indication? So is it close?
Elections?
Yeah.
I don't want to talk about elections today because I want the public to pay attention. The only thing I'm talking about today and dealing with today is this issue that has been put before us and the headline of the Express, and I think it must be in other papers as well. So having said that, thank you all very much for coming.
Yeah, it's just
another question. Also, just to follow
up, I don't want you to distract the public with anything else today. We'll have lots of other days for other matters.
It's not about a distraction. I was just wondering, in terms of the same matter that you've raised, is it that the EMBD has to constantly update the line minister or the cabinet on its proceedings? What is the situation with that?
EMBD doesn't run a commentary with the minister, but I guess that as matters. Their reports, companies report, they spend a lot of money. It starts with, as I said earlier on, it started with a demand to pay a lot of money. EMBD is a company that doesn't have much revenue. They have very little. I think the only revenue stream is a quarry. And I think at the time when this started out, they weren't getting that revenue. EMBD is a state entity that is funded almost 100% by the Treasury because they don't have a revenue stream. And this thing here had to do with them being given a job to do, because we had to give plots to carry the workers. EMBD was given the job to prepare these plots and putting some infrastructure. But the time frame, the expenditure, the claims, the certification, all that came into question. And that's how this lawsuit was generated. So there's nothing unusual about it, and the attempt to tarnish it in a variety of ways, simply other people's position. It is normal work being done by an entity.
So the press conference would be held at Balizé House. That was cancelled. It was then we told it's happening here. You see a number of government ministers here. And I think some people are also curious about the issue of this in the context of your pending retirement, as it were, and Minister Young being the next Prime Minister.
I haven't retired yet. I mean, I'm responsible for the affairs of this country until I've actually given up in the formal way. So whatever happens, I'm still responsible. And that is why I could not have allowed this development this morning to go unaddressed. The public had to be told what the facts are on this matter where the state's operations are being portrayed in a particular way by persons in the most self-serving manner.
One question, please, of great public importance. I know this month it was confirmed that you all will be receiving your higher salaries, right? Yesterday we had two of the biggest unions in the country telling its members and the public that they want them to remember this moment here when they go to the polls because of all the times they've fought for more salary, for a higher salary. We've heard economists saying that given that you all didn't really grow the economy, you all don't deserve more money at this time. Do you still believe it was the right thing to do to accept the recommendations of the SRA?
I'm not getting in that debate, you know. I mean, all this does is tell you that we still have freedom of expression in the country. And I'm not debating the work. From this very podium I told you before, having taken the government's position, the parliament's position, proceed, I know that there are differences of opinion over the matter. So you're not telling me anything new there. There are differences of opinion. But in terms of doing the right thing, I have not advocated for anything publicly, personally. And I decided, as I told you before, that I'm quite comfortable dealing with what the work of the Election and Boundaries Commission, the Salaries Review Commission. So there's nothing new here to me, and I think people have their views and they will express them as they go along. On what matter?
On this matter here, people who are saying, you know, we catching our tail, you all filling your pockets right now, we could barely pay rent, we could barely pay for transport.
You can carry on that as much as you like. You're not the public. Let me just tell you something. Yeah, but I'm saying to you, today, I have discharged the public's interests. I have looked after the public interests. Good day.